We go. All right, ladies and gents, welcome back to World History. This is our last lecture of the week on a beautiful Wednesday. Like I said to the class as we were kind of coming in and getting ready to set up on the Zoom call, make sure to get outside. That's the best way to make sure that this whole shelter-in-place, self-isolation kind of experience is okay, is enjoying the nice weather out there. But make sure to keep your social distance. So I'm happy to see everyone is in the call and joined up and ready to go. All right. We're going to start class today with a couple of reminders to make sure everyone is following along. And I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir because I'm telling this to the people that are showing up for the live online classes. But just in case we have some people that aren't quite on the same page, I want us to pay attention to a few things. Just like I said yesterday, guys, all right? I sent out a bunch of emails at the beginning of the week that let you know if you were missing assignments in my class. You need to check your email. You need to respond to that email if I sent you one, and you need to turn in your late work, all right? As we move forward in this process, these due dates and different things are going to get a little bit different and maybe a little bit more hardcore, if you will. So you're going to have to really jump in and make sure you are meeting the deadlines, all right? We're being a little flexible here at the beginning of the week because this is a whole like intro to e-learning experience. I know we have to kind of get a feel for what things look like and understand what's going on. But make sure that you have all of your assignments turned in. You answer my email if you have late work, because if you don't answer my email, then I think that you're not getting emails. You might not have internet. I don't know what's going on. So then I have to talk to the principal and we have to start contacting your parents. So make sure you're getting that stuff done so that you're prepped and ready to go. All right? I want everyone to understand that that's what we're talking about here today. All right, it looks like everyone's joined up. We've given a little time for everyone to make sure they're in the class. I'm happy to see all of these wonderful name boxes here in class. All right, so here's what we're going to do today, guys. We are going to finish out our understanding of the 1930s so that we can start getting into the nitty-gritty of World War II next week. All right, and so we're going to finish up this week by talking about the end of the Great Depression, or kind of what life was like a little bit during the Great Depression, the rise of dictators or totalitarian leaders, and how the world tried to kind of keep that down. All right, we're going to look at the rise of Hitler, the rise of Stalin, the rise of Mussolini, and talk a little bit about those things. But to keep track of all that information, in the same way that we kept track of the information yesterday, here's what I need you to do. Number one, I need you to, if you have not, all right, watched previous classes or gone onto YouTube and seen those previous classes, I need you to make sure you go back and do that, because all this information is going to be helpful and only really makes sense to you if you get all the stuff from before, all right? And number two, I need you to pull out something to take notes on, whether that be a Google Doc that you started or just a little notebook that you have. It's the same way that we were taking notes yesterday. We're going to finish out taking notes today, and then we're going to end today rather quickly. It's not going to be too long of a day today. So I need everyone to pull out something to take notes on. Remember, it can be a Google Doc or it can be a hard copy, whatever works for you. But what I need you to do is I need you to remember to go into that participants tab, and I need you to click on yes once you have something, you are prepped and ready to work through some stuff and take some notes before we begin. So I see Elaine already got it, Aiden got it.
Glender.
Make sure to click on that participants tab and then click yes, so I can look down and see that everyone is prepped and following along and ready to go. Awesome. I see that some people are struggling a little bit to find it. Make sure we have all of that ready to go. We have 42 people in today's class. That's awesome. Great. Sweet. It looks like most of us have our notes and are ready to go. All right. Find something. Make sure you're prepped. We're going to kind of move through this pretty quickly, just like we did yesterday. Remember, if at any point, guys, you have any questions, make sure to unmute your mic. I'll stop. I'll answer your questions and make sure we are all good to go and understand what's going on. All right? So let's, without further ado, begin a little bit here today. I'm going to share my screen here with you real quick so that you can see what's going on. And we're going to take a few little notes. Now, if you remember, yesterday what we left off on, okay, was this idea of a worldwide depression. So you should be able to find in your notes the section that we talked about, a worldwide depression. We talked about how at the end of the 1920s, in 1929 specifically actually, the stock market crashed in the United States. And the problem with that crash was that every other world economy was really hanging on to the United States stock market. So when the world economy was based on the US and the United States crashed, then we had huge problems. And the whole world was looking for answers, and they were thrown into a Great Depression. So make sure you take away, guys, that the Great Depression, it wasn't just a United States thing. It happened worldwide. We call it the world economic crisis because across the globe, every single country was suffering in very similar ways. And that's really what we broke down and talked about yesterday. All right? So in 1929, the world was thrown into a depression. We see these bread lines, these coffee lines, this kid right here holding a picket sign down here in the bottom that says, hey, why can't you give my dad a job? All right? So this is kind of a big deal that we see start to develop and change and really have an impact. All right? Nearly every country around the world was impacted. Now, you should have all this information down. We're going to pick up where we left off because now we're going to talk about what happens in the midst of this depression. Well, everyone is suffering and everyone is looking for answers. Remember, all of these countries are desperate. They're trying to recover. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And then we see these boys rise to power. All right? You'll probably recognize some of these pictures. What's one picture that you guys automatically recognize up there? Someone unmute and tell me.
Stalin.
Okay, Stalin. Okay, we got Stalin. Who else do we have? Hitler. That one's pretty easy, right? We've got Hitler. All right.
I don't know the others.
You don't know the others? Okay, this guy over here, this weirdo that's kind of bald all the way over here on the right, that guy's name is Benito Mussolini. What country do you think he'd be from?
Italy?
Italy. Good guess. Italy. Yes. So, after World War I, we see these guys rise to power in the midst of the Great Depression and the world economic crisis. All right? We call these guys totalitarian leaders. Now, that seems like a really big word. Guys, make sure you're muted. Make sure you're muted so that we're not interfering with the recording here. Thank you. Awesome. So we call these guys totalitarian leaders. And that seems like a really big word. But the reason we call them totalitarian leaders is if you look at the base of this word, does anyone recognize what is the base of totalitarian?
Oh my God, why is this thing on my way? Total.
Total. Awesome. So total is what you need to understand from totalitarian. They have total and complete control. They're basically dictators. That's why we call this the rise of the dictators. Because, guys, all of these people start to rise and they come to power in their own ways. All right? We have Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Joseph Stalin. This guy down here is Emperor Hirohito. He actually leads the country of Japan during this time. And so across the globe, we see these crazy leaders that have complete and total control rising up in all these different spots. Now, one thing that you'll realize and recognize is that as we start thinking ahead to World War II, if you look at each of these leaders unites or comes together to form the Axis powers during World War II, right? Because Joseph Stalin is a leader of Russia, Adolf Hitler, a leader of Germany, Mussolini, a leader of Italy, and Hirohito, a leader of Japan, the four countries that really made up the Axis powers during this time. So all of these things that we have to kind of consider as we move towards World War I. Now, what you have to also understand is that as these crazy dudes come to power, guys, their mind isn't really focused on war. In fact, most people at this time, in the 1920s, in the 1930s, they looked down upon the violence of World War I. They hated it. They thought it was one of the worst things that humans could have ever done, was go to war on a global scale. Lots of academics and leaders and people were thinking this is impossible. This should have never happened. Okay? This is a horrible, horrible way to go about doing these different things. And so, lots of people called World War I a moral folly, that it was the breakdown of society. And none of these guys, when they rose to power, were like, hey, we want to go pop someone in the mouth and start a war. That really wasn't the ideas that were on their brain. A lot of people said, we might want to take back things, but we really don't want to have a global war like World War I. Because it was so bloody, it was so horrible, and it left a scarring impact. I mean, we talked about some of the things that we saw during World War I. One of the craziest facts that we kind of mentioned in class a little bit, as we talked about our last unit, was the use of like chemical warfare and mustard gas. Hitler himself was a victim of chemical warfare in World War I. Adolf Hitler was a soldier for the country of Germany. He fought for the Central Powers. He ended up being a victim of a mustard gas attack, and part of that led him to not only really kind of restrict his idea of maybe it's not right to use chemical warfare, except when it came to the Holocaust, but also it made him angry, and it started that kind of idea within him that helped him rise to power in Germany, which is what we're going to look at. So remember, guys, if I'm moving too quick and I switch the slides and you haven't had time to write down and catch up, make sure to unmute your mic and just say, hey, can you go back real quick? And I will skip back for you to take a look. All right. So these are the dudes that we see rise to power, but where are they at? Let's look a little deeper. The rise of totalitarian leaders. Here is our class definition of what a totalitarian leader is. Make sure to write this down, okay? A totalitarian leader is a leader of a government that has complete and total control of almost everything. Basically, guys, a totalitarian leader is a dictator. Pretty plain and simple. We see it in lots of places. We especially see it during the 1930s and the 1920s as these leaders rise to power across the globe. So the rise of totalitarian leaders, which is a leader of a government that has complete and total control of almost everything. Angel, do you have a question? You keep saying you're raising your hand.
What?
You have a question? You keep saying that you raised your hand.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay. So make sure you know what a totalitarian leader is. Let's look at three of the most famous totalitarian leaders during this time period and talk about how they rose to power. All right? The first country that we're going to focus on is Germany. Someone unmute and tell me, who's the totalitarian leader that rises to power in Germany? We all know his face and name.
Hitler.
Hitler. Pretty easy, pretty simple. It was Hitler. All right? But how did Hitler actually rise to power? Here's a quick little blurb on how he got there. All right? Hitler rose to power as a totalitarian leader. And if you look, I've got TL right there. That just stands for totalitarian leader, so you don't have to write the whole thing. He rose to power as a totalitarian leader or a dictator, and he did so by blaming Germany's struggles on a bad deal at the end of World War I. He looked at the Treaty of Versailles and he said, hey, guess what? We as Germans were blamed, we were cheated, and we deserve better. We had to give up our military. We had to give up our land. We had to give up our people. It doesn't make sense. And he uses that to rise to power and say Germany needs to come together and be stronger as a whole. Now, Hitler also rose to power, okay, by having a huge movement of nationalism, saying like, hey, as a country, as a people, here's what we need to do. We need to unite under this German ethnic pride. And then last but not least, he also blamed a lot of the struggles on the Jewish populations or people that were in Germany and German territories at the time. And so he uses kind of this three-pronged approach to rise to power, to win over the people of his nation. Guys, it is a common misconception that people were like swearing off Hitler back when he rose to power in the 1930s. No, everyone was pretty gung-ho about his leadership, his power, and his approach to what he was doing in his country. Lots of people were on board with this movement, all right? And that's how he rises to power and becomes so popular and ends up leading the nation. All right, the next country that we're looking at is Russia, all right? In Russia, we see almost the same thing happen, minus the blame game where Hitler really blamed a lot of things on Jewish people. Instead, we see this guy named Joseph Stalin rise to power as a leader. He was a classic Russian leader at this time. He rules with an iron fist. He's actually an incredibly, incredibly vicious, violent leader. He murders millions of his own people because he's trying to kind of purify this idea of Russia. He says he's trying to make Russia stronger, and he's trying to lead them into this next century and help them modernize and be powerful. And so Joseph Stalin rises to power under this understanding that he's going to make Russia great. It's going to be fantastic, the best thing in the whole world. And as he does so, he gets Russia involved in a lot of military conflicts, and at the same time also ends up murdering millions and millions of his own people in his country. And so in Russia, we have almost the same situation that we see in Germany, minus the blaming of the Jews. But we see these really strong leaders that win over the hearts and the minds of people that allow them to come to power. And the last kind of piece of this puzzle that we see is the last real totalitarian leader from the Axis powers that we break down in this class, and that is this dude named Benito Mussolini from Italy. All right? In Italy, I know I sound like a broken record, but in Italy we have almost the exact same thing happening when it comes to this whole idea of totalitarian leaders. Okay? Benito Mussolini rose to power, and he does so by gaining popularity. In almost the same way that Hitler does. He says, hey, we need to be a strong Italian nation. He says Italians are powerful. We should have pride in being Italians. He runs on this idea that he's going to strengthen the military, that he's going to make people fear the Italian nation, that he's going to make them powerful. And he has this kind of like big, blustering personality. We can actually watch, and that's what we're going to do next time, is we're going to watch World War II oversimplified, the beginning of it, and you'll see like the way that Benito Mussolini talks. It is very much to win over the hearts and minds of people. He's super passionate, super flamboyant, super crazy, and that's how he kind of rises to power. And so in these three specific areas, guys, we see these totalitarian leaders or dictators that end up ruling these major countries. And the crazy thing about it is that these major countries are then going to switch over and end up uniting together and becoming the force that is fought against in World War II. And so all of these things, like I said, are leading us to the brink, to the front door of the beginnings of World War II. So we have these totalitarian leaders, these crazy people coming up with all these ideas, all right? We have the suffering of the Great Depression and the world economic crisis. We have the United States trying to rebuild. And in all of this, we see the path towards conflict, the beginnings of how things are going to kind of erupt into World War II. And the cherry on top, the icing on the cake, guys, is this belief that the League of Nations, remember that thing that we talked about last time, that whole group of countries that get together and they try to talk things out before they actually go to war and fight, right? It's this idea that's supposed to lead to forever peace, all right? We see that these pieces start to break down. They don't work as they should, and they actually end up falling to these different pieces we've talked about. So what happens in the 1930s is we see challenges arise. And I want you to make sure to write this down, because this is what sets the stage for the lead up into World War II, all right? Challenges arise in the 1930s. Across the globe, totalitarian leaders actually start to make moves, okay? In Japan, what they do, Emperor Hirohito actually commands his troops, they invade China. They have no mercy. They start invading China, the Philippines, all of the Pacific Island nations that are down around that area. They start invading and expanding because they say, hey, it's their right. They need to be a strong Japanese government, just like we see in all these other countries, all right? In the same way, we start to see in the early 30s, okay, Hitler starts to become an issue. What he starts to do is slowly but surely, and we can look back at it now and understand what he was doing, but slowly and surely what he starts to do is he starts to reach out and take in the pieces of land that Germany lost with the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I. So the first move he makes is he annexes Austria. The entire country of Austria, which is actually where Hitler is born, that's where he's from, he annexes it, which means basically He goes to the government and says, hey, Germany wants to take you over. We want to make you part of the German nation. And Austria actually ends up, and it's absolutely crazy, they end up welcoming Hitler. In fact, you can still find videos to this day of Nazi soldiers marching in with tanks and military and all this stuff into Austria, and all of the Austrian people are like waving and cheering because they're happy because they're going to be a unified German nation again. And so Hitler starts to make moves and starts to take pieces of land. Now, the biggest problem in all of that is that Germany had signed a treaty at the end of World War I, the Treaty of Versailles, that said they couldn't reach out and have more land. They had to give up a bunch of territory. They couldn't have a huge military, right? They had to keep it really small. They had to stay demilitarized, and they had to pay back all this money. Well, what starts to happen is we see that Hitler starts to slowly and surely fight against those ideas. And so what happens is that the countries of the world, especially the League of Nations, they get together and they say, oh, okay, here's the deal. We realize that Hitler is taking a step in the wrong direction. He might be going a little bit against what we established at the end of World War I. But we don't want to start another war. We don't want to anger Germany. We are all still recovering from this whole thing. And so countries start to reach out, and we see this thing called appeasement begin. All right? Now, appeasement is interesting, guys, because the idea of appeasement, and I want you to write this down, okay? I have what is it right here on the slides. I want you to write this down. Guys, appeasement was the act of all of these countries trying to make Germany happy by giving them little victories to try to keep the peace. So when Hitler annexes Austria, it's crazy. What the League of Nations ends up doing is they actually send a representative. They send this guy from Great Britain, all right, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. He flies over to Germany, and he basically says, okay, here's the deal. You need to not take over any more territory. And so Hitler goes, yeah, okay, I won't take over any more territory, as long as I can keep Austria. And they say, yeah, we'll let you keep Austria, but you can't take any more. You need to sign this piece of paper that says you're not going to take any more territory. So then they get Hitler to sign this piece of paper. They go back and they say, hey, we're victorious. We still made sure that we have peace, and we made sure that Germany didn't take over any more territory. And then, like, the next month after that, guess what Germany does? Hitler steps out and takes another piece of land. He takes the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. And we'll talk about all this in little pieces. But he does that, and that's what appeasement was. And then the League of Nations sends another representative and says, hey, you promised. And he says, oh, sorry, my bad. I'm just doing what I thought was right. I'll sign another piece of paper saying that I won't take any more if you let me have Czechoslovakia. And then the League of Nations and a bunch of the allied powers, especially Great Britain, who kind of leads this talk, this diplomacy, says, okay, yeah, sign another piece of paper. Hitler agrees, and then 2 months later or half a year later, guess what happens? Germany takes another country. And it's slow and sure, this rebuilding of not only a military, but also this takeover of complete territories. All right? So make sure you understand that, because that is what appeasement is. All right? And we can see this in a bunch of different ways. So I did promise that as we talked about appeasement, we would discuss a little bit about the League of Nations and why it was so bad. So we talked about the League of Nations, and we talked about how Woodrow Wilson came up with this idea at the end of World War I. All these countries would come together, and they would work together and talk things out before they ever went to war. Well, one thing I also mentioned is that I had this really fun activity that if we were in class, we'd be able to do, but it's kind of this experiment with the League of Nations. Ultimately, what we see happen during this time period is the League of Nations is garbo. It's horrible. It doesn't end up really doing anything for the benefit of peace. They try, as we see with appeasement, but it never really works. And there are a few different reasons why the League of Nations never really works. All right, this group of countries that tries to achieve peace during the interwar years and make all of this make sense, are missing a few key things. And I want to hit on those right here at the end of this, this class. Okay, guys? So this ineffective League of Nations is really bolstered by the idea of all of these countries were looking out for themselves. They had their own interests at heart. And ultimately, there were no consequences for not listening. So when the League of Nations said, hey, don't take any more territory, and Hitler took more territory, there was actually nothing they could do. Because the League of Nations did not have a military. The League of Nations did not have the ability to like throttle down or sanction or make life hard or do anything like that. Instead, all the League of Nations could do is backtrack and say, oh yeah, that's what we meant. Just play nice. And then keep giving up and giving up more and more things. So I've got a few points as to why the League of Nations didn't work and why it didn't really promote peace or end up being successful at this time. All right, guys? Now, these are going to be pretty important because I know this is on your quiz that's for today. So make sure to write these down. The League of Nations didn't really work for a few main reasons. Number one, the first main reason is because they were unorganized. All of these countries came to the negotiating table to have this diplomacy and talk things out, but there wasn't a really good organization. There wasn't like an established leader or people that could step up and do those different things. All right? Number two, no one wanted to listen to the other nations or give up any power that they had. So when Germany invaded China and the United States, which couldn't be a part of the League of Nations, right? They couldn't have any say whatsoever in this whole process. Couldn't say anything. And so Great Britain steps in and says, hey, don't take over China. Japan would just say, no, we're going to do what we want. Because there was no reason to give up any power to the process. There was no incentive. Number three, there were no real consequences, okay? There were no real consequences for ending up not listening to the actual body of the League of Nations. Requirements to actually join the League of Nations and to contribute and to be a part of it were really limited. You didn't really even have to listen to still be a part of the League of Nations. So it was just a rough, unorganized body. And then last but not least, the United States that had designed and come up with the whole idea under President Woodrow Wilson wasn't even a part of the League of Nations. They didn't even have a say in what was going on because the United States Congress, remember we talked about this, didn't approve the Treaty of Versailles. So it didn't allow the United States to be part of the League of Nations. So all of a sudden, we had this body that was really ineffective. It wasn't working the way it should have. And it ends up failing at its ultimate goal of maintaining peace. And we know that's a fact because we know that World War II exists. So I just wanted to break that down really quick for you so that we understand how the League worked. I really wish we could have done our fun activity because it's a whole thing where you get to each be a country of the League of Nations, and it's a lot of fun. But this is the down and dirty of what we learned from that. That the League of Nations didn't work, that it leads to all these problems, especially the problem of appeasement. All right. So that being said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here real quick, and I want to see how we're doing. So, guys, that is where our notes end for today. In fact, that's where our notes on the 1930s really end, because where we pick up next week is the beginning of World War II. We'll actually watch as Hitler starts to take over more territory, things begin to change, and eventually countries just feel like they have to pop other countries in the mouth to keep them from moving. The League of Nations breaks down, and we see an all-out war once again around the globe. Now, does anyone have any questions over the notes before we move on and talk about what you have to do for your assignment?
Are you going to be posting the slideshow?
Haley, good question. I will post the slideshow when I post the YouTube video recording of this class. All right? I'll attach it just to that announcement in Google Classroom.
What's our assignment?
Russia and
Good.
the Allies, not the Axis.
What's up?
Isn't Russia an allied country, not an Axis country?
Russia is actually an Axis country, and then they switch to the Allies after Germany decides to invade them, because Hitler gets so greedy that he invades an ally. He invades a country that was an Axis power. And so Russia technically ends up being both, but they start out as an Axis power and then switch when Hitler invades them.
What's
Very
our
funny joke about invading Russia coming up. Have fun, guys.
Okay, so Mariah, you had a question. What's our assignment? So,
Yeah.
if you take a look on Classroom, I've posted a quick little 10-question multiple choice quiz over the stuff that we've talked about for the 3 classes of this week. All right? It's just a quick little multiple choice thing. You can use your notes on it. I would suggest using your notes on it, okay? Because it's going to help you a lot. That's why we took these notes. And it's just to kind of make sure that everyone's paying attention and getting their stuff done. So
I was doing science, so I was late for the notes, and I was like, dang it.
well, that's a good thing about everything going up on YouTube. So if you miss any part of class and you're like, I don't know what's going on, make sure to check the YouTube link because I post, okay, a recording of all of this stuff that we do in class. This exact meeting gets recorded and gets posted, so double check that. So our assignment. Let me share my screen again with you guys so that you can see what's going on. All right. Our assignment is, if you go into Google Classroom, you'll see right here, if we update our stream, I say, hey class, here's what's going on. I give you our agenda for today, all right? And then down here it says, Jonathan Boyd posted a new assignment, the 1930s/Rise of Dictators quiz. You can also find that by going to classwork, and you can see all of the assignments that have been given in this class, all right? You click on this one, all you have to do is click on the form and take it, all right? The grade gets imported automatically. It'll tell you what you got. It'll also tell you what the right answers were if you got it wrong. Quick 10 questions, pretty easy. So before we kind of let out for today, I want to ask a quick question. Someone unmute and tell me how many assignments are due on Saturday of this week? How many assignments?
2.
Just 2. Awesome. It's just 2 assignments. You have to do that 1920s boom to bust where you watched the YouTube video and filled out the viewing guide. And then you have to do that quiz, okay, this end of the week Rise of Dictators quiz for me in Google Classroom. So if both of those things are
You had
taken
a
care of,
question that doesn't even have a real answer on the quiz.
what's up?
One of the questions on the quiz don't even actually have an answer.
Which one?
It says no correct answers.
Let me double check it. I can fix that.
Yeah, because could have got it.
I'll take a look at yours. Awesome. Thanks for letting me know. All right, guys. So you did awesome this week. I'm happy to see everyone here. If you have questions, you can stick around. But remember, I have my office hours this week. All right. I have them tomorrow from 10 to 11. And then I have on Friday my office hours from 1 to 2. So make sure to pop in and ask any questions if you have questions. Answer my missing work emails. Make sure to get your missing work into me so that you can get credit. Stay on top of your stuff. It was great to see you guys. If you have any questions, you can stick around. If not, you're good to go.
Yeah, it says. One of the questions on the quiz says, which of these is not an event in the 1920s?
Yeah,
And it says no correct answers.
that's the one.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Tristan. I'll modify your grade and I'll fix that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Bye, Boyd.
See ya.
Repeat what appeasement was.
Yes, I can repeat what appeasement was. So appeasement was the idea that the allied countries or the countries of the League of Nations would give up tiny little victories to Germany so that they could keep the peace.
Okay, thanks.
So they give up a little bit of land or a little bit of thing like that. Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Boyd.
What's up?
Where would I find the notes for the quiz?
Okay, so the notes for the quiz are in a couple different spots, all right? The first spot that you can look for this specific quiz that we're taking right now is that I'm going to post a recording of this lecture, okay, that we just took today on YouTube. And you can get what you might have missed from last class. I posted the YouTube link to yesterday's class on Classroom as well. So if you click on there, it's like the 15 minutes that we took notes, and you can go through there and you can write down the stuff and have that.
All right. Thank you.
No problem.
Good question, Felicity.
All right, guys, does anyone else have any questions for me? If not, I'm going to stop our recording here, and we are going to be good to go. Sweet. Guys, it was good to see y'all. I will see
Mr.
you.
Boyd, can you email me a list of my missing assignments?
Was that Haley? Who was I talking to right there?
That's me. Sorry.
Haley, that was you?
Yeah, sorry. I'm
Okay.
learning this still.
Do you want a list of your missing assignments, or are you just messing around?